All right.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
Someone told me I'm grumpy. I'm trying to smile more. 5,
Oh.
4.
Welcome to another episode of Talking Kotlin. My name is still Seb. I'm one of your hosts, and who you see smiling right here for a change is my co-host Hadi. Hadi, why are you so happy?
Oh, hi, Seb. I'm just smiling because I have been having all energy day
Not
capsules
this again.
with
No.
green tea
EGCG. We're not. No.
Brought to you by Joe Weider's Victory Endurance.
We don't have a sponsorship deal, Hadi. I don't know why you keep doing this. It's just asking for trouble.
This is better. This is kind of like word of mouth marketing, right? They're not even paying us for this. Like, I take this, I smile, it makes me happy. Okay, that sounded really weird. I swear it's just vitamins, nothing else. Anyway, we've got a guest today, right? It's not just the two of us.
Yeah, no, we sure do. Joining us today is Zac Sweers, who's a staff software engineer at Slack. Welcome to the show.
Hello, good to be back.
Hey, Zach, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's a little bit cold here today. Yesterday, it got up to like 15 Celsius, and that was really warm, and everybody was excited, and now it's not. Now it's winter again.
You can really tell that you've been on this show before.
I just want to point out.
I know the first subject, so like I'm ready for it.
We did not say anything about Zach talking about the weather. Okay,
Yep.
That is completely and utterly natural, and I love it. But it is natural. Here it's 19 degrees, blue skies, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. Here it's dark out, so I can't see.
Don't even go there. Yeah. So I was speaking to one of our colleagues that is also in Munich, and I was outside walking the dog, and he's like seeing the blue skies. He's like, is that a blue sky? I'm like, yeah, you don't see that too frequently, do you? And he said it was just in Vegas indoors, and they had simulated a blue sky indoors in Vegas.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Sounds like a very Vegas thing to do.
Totally. But talking about Vegas, I miss travel so much that I would even go to Vegas right now. That's how much I miss travel.
You're not a fan of Vegas?
Well, I've done it like 4 or 5 times.
Okay.
And then, once you've done it once, the other 4 or 5 times gets a little bit boring.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I just remember the smoldering heat.
I was talking with a friend about possibly, so I haven't really done a trip since the beginning of the pandemic, other than one trip back to Texas for like a weekend. And so finally looking at taking a trip with a friend for New Year's to Iceland, to which my other friends have said, nice. You're finally going on a trip, but it's to Iceland in December. What is wrong with you? So yeah, making baby steps.
But actually, Iceland is like on my list of places I would love to visit any time of year, winter, summer, whenever.
I've been twice before, both times in that sort of like whirlwind, like 12-hour layover. So I just like leave the airport and then like do what I can for 10 hours and come back. And so I'll try to go for like 24 hours at least this time.
So that is my trips. You literally described my trip to New York. I have flown through JFK like countless times. And the only time I stepped outside is I went to you call it a metro? I mean, the underground, what do you call it? The metro?
Subway. The
subway. Yeah, sorry. And I got on and I said, I want to go to the city center. And people were looking at me weird, like, what do you mean city center? So I just started to go, and where I felt like this looks reasonable, I got off. And there was a long stretch until it became reasonable. But yeah.
Yeah, it's every other city, well, not every city in Europe I go to, there's always like an express train from like the main like city centrum to the airport. And then New York has 3 major airports, and all of them take forever to get to. Like you can take the subway out to JFK, but you stop at everything between Manhattan and JFK, which there's a lot. So it's, I don't know. Express trains in the US in general, they're not there yet. if you go to DC on a train, you stop at every major US city between New York and DC, which, as it happens, there's a lot of them. So it takes like 7 hours to get there. And or I did a train to Charlottesville once, and I actually like measured it. Sorry, the train to Charlottesville was 7 hours. Charlottesville is in Northern Virginia. And I measured it on like Google Maps that it's almost exactly the same distance as doing a train from Amsterdam to Paris, which I've done a couple of times before. The Amsterdam-Paris train on like Thalys is 3 hours flat. And this train from New York to Charlottesville was 7. And I was just like, it's a whole day.
So talking about trains, what have you been up to lately? Seb loves my segues.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I basically left San Francisco, took 6 months off, traveled around a bunch of different places, went home for a bit, and then moved to New York without having a job or apartment lined up, and just sort of, I don't know, winged it. And I started talking with Slack right before I moved here. That went really well. I really liked the people and the process, and I sort of talked with them a little bit before leaving SF as well. Yeah, so joined Slack a few weeks later after I got here. New York was amazing for about 3 months, and then the pandemic hit, and I've been inside ever since. No, not really. We actually, like, I think in terms of places to be stuck in for the pandemic, New York, like after June, July of last year, has been about as good as it gets, I think, because you don't really feel, I think, the same degree of isolation, because everybody's here. You've got great parks. Like, you can still do a lot of things outside. There's like been a real atmosphere and like energy here that has been really nice, especially like compared to when I went back to visit family in Texas. It's like, I can't imagine having to, during the worst parts of this, be just like stuck at home with like not being able to just like walk to somewhere. So I don't know, that sounded very vague, but yeah, anyways, things are good. I started fostering dogs. So if you'll see her move a little bit in the reflection here. She's very cute. And then just kind of doing a lot of the same things as before. So I'm still like working in open source, still like tweeting.
Yeah, we're going to get to the tweeting a little bit later, because that has a theme, the tweeting, which we're going to cover.
Yeah,
certainly. But yeah, what if you kind of what's new in like in the Kotlin space for you recently? Like, what have you been kind of working on there in this area?
We were joking about this right before this, but I changed my title internally for a little while as a joke to Chief Dependency Updater, and had to change it back after someone thought that was real. But a big thing that I've enjoyed doing, just sort of on the side here, is trying to keep our code base as like basically modern as possible. There's like a good line somewhere about like life's too short to use old tools. Developers are happier whenever they can use sort of the latest and greatest. It's always mildly terrifying to walk into a code base where you're just like, you see using versions from 2015, and you're like, but it's changed since then. There's new things, and what are we doing? So that's kind of like turned into like a pretty cool adventure in terms of a lot of like neat projects have come out of that. So we published a blog post about a pattern we use called shadow jobs, which is basically, when you take on new versions, if you want to do like same day upgrades, like you want to be able to guarantee some degree of safety with that. And a lot of times, like in past jobs or talking with other people, like the common pattern is wait for like the first patch release or wait for the first stop release. Like support libraries for Android for a long time, it was like, okay, the .0 release, don't touch it. We always wait for the first patch release after. And sorry, Google friends. But it's like a real thing. Like if you don't have any sort of like testing with it, then like you're gonna potentially be in for a surprise. And so we started using the system of shadow jobs, where we're like on a nightly basis building our entire repo against future versions of different tools that we use. So like Kotlin EAPs or upcoming like Android Gradle plugin versions, things like that. And that's actually been now it's really simple, and all we have to do is just like change a version to, test newer things. But it's actually helped us catch like dozens and dozens of issues like really early and give that feedback. So that's been actually sort of like a fun little at work passion project type thing.
So how do you kind of divide that? Who does that at work?
Me right now.
You keep saying we, and I'm like, he's got a team of people.
Well, other people come in and work on it periodically. There's one guy who always reviews my pull requests. So thank you,
Nice.
Jonathan. Periodically other folks come in and work on parts of it. So like we spun up some internal runners for GitHub Actions, because the default GitHub Actions instances are really slow. And so we put a few beefy AWS boxes on it internally. And so all these jobs run through that. And obviously, like, I have no idea how any of that works. So another guy named Jesse helped out with that. Otherwise, like, it's pretty low maintenance, which I think is sort of something that people, even after the blog post, like, don't realize how easy it is to like get something basic for this like up and running. And the value that we get out of it is just like massive, because every time basically there's a new release, the only time we ever have like issues with trying to update same day is either things that we didn't test in the shadow jobs, which has happened basically every time. Like if there's something that, so going back to some of the stuff I tweeted about, there's a bug with incremental compilation, which on CI, you're never doing incremental compilation because you just build it once and see if it works. And so like, that's like a great example of how just like the little things that we like don't cover, like that's where we find the bugs later. So it's pretty low maintenance now that it's like set up, and it's just, periodically you'll see new versions of something, or, there's like an RC for Kotlin out, and then we say, all right, cool. Stick that on shadow jobs, see what they say.
Are you only looking at whether things still work in the new version, or are you also automatically collecting things like performance metrics or something else?
So initially it was just to see if things work. Now we are also collecting more performance data. In particular, not so much looking at it on aggregate, but in trying to diagnose issues with builds. There's these like 3 magic properties that someone from JetBrains sent me after I did a blog post about like Kotlin build performance that I don't remember what they are, but like you add those 3 into your Gradle properties, and then KGP will actually write out a whole very like detailed build report at the end of it that you can go look at to try to diagnose slow compilation times or incremental compilation issues. It's actually like amazing, and I hope that like becomes a more productionized feature, I guess. Like it'd be cool if that could hook into other systems or output some format that's like easy to scrape and put somewhere else. Right now we kind of just eyeball it.
And do you do individual dependencies, or you just do it all at once? Like, let's see if anything breaks.
So we do run it as a matrix. I don't really know that we've ever gotten too much value out of the matrix. That sounded like a meta comment from upcoming movies. We do run it as a matrix so we can like see if something goes wrong in particular places, but we haven't really seen too much variation from that. So like another thing that we want to eventually do someday is like the runtime dependencies version of this, where we like run that like Gradle versions plugin and then like read everything back from it that it says has newer versions, and we just like plug all those in and then see if it works. But yeah, it's in the past when we were trying to move from JDK 8 to a higher JDK, and like that's where we saw a lot of like this only affects this version of Kotlin, or it only works on this version of AGP, those kinds of things. But otherwise, it's been pretty smooth sailing for the better part of like a year, to where, if one thing breaks, then everything with that variant breaks, and that's it. It's not really any sort of like surprise combinations that throw things off.
So what else? I mean, for folks, I don't think you even mentioned this, right? Because folks that don't know you, you work at Slack currently, right? Did you mention that? Did we actually mention Slack?
Yeah.
Oh, we did? Oh.
Wait, is that where? Oh, I had no idea. Okay, good to know. Yeah.
Okay.
This explains so much.
Okay, never mind. So what I was going to ask you, to get a better picture of the whole thing, where does Kotlin fit in at Slack? I mean, where are you using it?
It fits into, last I checked, about 86% of the Android code base. So we're doing pretty good. We would like to someday get to like 100%. It's not like, we don't feel like it's any sort of like burning issue to migrate over that last 15%. But
it's like code coverage, right? It's like, it's okay.
We nuked code coverage from our code base about 2 months ago, and it lowered CI time by 10 minutes. So that was great. We've been using Kotlin, I think, since like 2015, 2016, like pretty early days for Slack, at least. I think it predates at least like Google officially like endorsing it as a first party language for Android. Yeah, I mean, all new development these days happens in Kotlin, except for like a few random Java files I wrote that predated direct annotation instantiation, which was my favorite Kotlin 1.6 feature. Other stuff, like we do a lot of our sort of like internal tooling in Kotlin as well. So like Android lint, Gradle plugins. It's become like sort of the de facto language that we use for, like, if you're an Android developer, then like you're usually kind of looking for a reason to use Kotlin on whatever you're working on, even if it's not necessarily like code going into the Android app. So like I've written a bunch of, I use it even just for like basic like scripting. So a lot of times we can like automate a migration in our code base, mostly with just sort of like fuzzy text matching, and I can just like write that into like a quick like main function and go.
Is that Kotlin scripting, or you actually use the main function and go?
Just the main function
and go.
Just run it in the IDE.
So we spent 7 years developing Kotlin scripting, and you just put it in a main function. Nice.
Every time I try Kotlin script, my IDE gets into this sort of like incomprehensible state, and then I have to like give up, and then I try it again a few years later. It's probably something I'm doing wrong, but it does frighten me.
No, Kotlin scripting is only supported in Vim.
Oh, all right. It's all coming together. This is why JetBrains released Fleet then.
Oh, you had to go there, didn't you?
You just need a light IDE for KScript. We don't really have much usage anywhere outside of the Android part of the company. We don't have that much JVM usage outside of the Android part of the company. Like the web app is all sort of this like hack and increasing like TypeScript backend, which I think makes us the only company not named Facebook that uses hack. The iOS team obviously is Objective-C before, and now mostly moved over to Swift. We have some Kotlin in our external like Slack SDKs. So we have like, because we're this whole big like pluggable platform, we've got a pretty like solid like dedicated wing of the company focused on external developer experience. And I believe you messaged me about this at one point, Hadi, that we in our Java SDK like release like a KTX basically equivalent artifact of like Kotlin extensions or like a DSL for composing like Slack messages in this SDK. Yeah. So it's not reached much outside of Android, but I would say like it's thought of fondly outside of Android because our tooling is still pretty great compared to iOS.
you mentioned the Kotlin SDK for Slack, and I think that's something that's maybe it's certainly interesting for me. Might be interesting to a couple of other listeners. Could you just first of all maybe describe why Slack even has an SDK? What you can even do with that?
Yeah, so I have to put a disclaimer that I'm not that familiar with it, but we maintain like external like open source SDKs in a bunch of different languages, frameworks, etc. That the idea is that we want to make it as easy as possible for somebody who wants to write something that plugs into Slack, whether that's writing an app that lives within Slack or writing a service or something that communicates with the Slack API. We want to make all that as easy as possible. And so we have a bunch of these SDKs that are sort of like batteries included. You can take this, here's how you send a message to a channel. Here's how you like apply formatting so it, linkifies things. Here's how you read certain information out of Slack. And this is, we have a Java SDK that, like I said, if I remember correctly, it publishes like a Kotlin artifact with some like nice extensions and like a neat DSL for composing messages. Since like Slack messages can be like very rich content, or if you want to even use what we call block kit, which is like, what's a good example of this? Like whenever there's like apps for like doing like a in-channel survey and it has like buttons and everything. So like that's using block kit. So you can send like really like rich content. And then they use Kotlin to make a nice DSL for composing those. I think I'm like 80% sure that's what it's for.
And you mentioned the mobile side, and you said Swift. So I'm guessing there's no KMM happening at Slack.
There's always like an interest in cross-platform in general. There used to be an actual like cross-platform shared native library before I joined, and that was shuttered as we'll call it a misadventure. But the interest has always been there. Like that one, they decided from a technical standpoint was too problematic to try to maintain. It was like some like compiled native library. One thing that I can definitely like describe is, so compared to where I was before, that was like a completely mobile centric company. Here, obviously, like the world sort of revolves around like the desktop app or the web app that lives in the Electron desktop app. And they, by virtue of the web technologies that they use and sort of like general like product emphasis, they are able to iterate much faster. And in comparison, mobile development seems quite slow. And so there's always an interest in cross-platform, if for no other reason than the belief that that will make development faster on mobile, because that's always seen as like a big limiting factor for delivering anything on the mobile side of things.
So what is the hurdle that needs to be overcome? I mean, if you take something like Kotlin and say, hey, folks, you know what? You can actually target web and mobile and the other mobile and server side and stuff. Like, so what's the issue?
I think that right now there's definitely probably a feeling of multiple things. I would say that there's unease and like trepidation about doing cross-platform initiatives because of so many scary stories that we hear externally, whether it's React Native adventures or a lot of the libraries that we see out in the wild for cross-platform are actually like Facebook style, where they actually push as much as they can down into like native C++ layers, but those feel very sort of like opaque and like the upside down that no one really like knows how to interpret. You've got our own experience with having like a shared internal library that we actually did like a blog post about it as well, sort of like describing like what went wrong with it and why we decided to decommission that plan. But yeah, and then there's also like people are working on other stuff. There's probably some degree of like, iOS developers probably don't want to use anything other than Swift. I should be more fair. If there was some sort of like cross-platform Swift on Android, we would probably also be less interested in that versus Kotlin. So it's people are comfortable with what they know. I think, and in a place where you're trying to, build fast and continue iterating, that doesn't always get the same level of like prioritization and green lighting as, I don't know, other stuff you'd want to do. So I think that if somebody were to come in like tomorrow and be like, here's an RFC, long doc about a proposal for KMM introduction, and here's how we can, bring it into iOS in a way that is non-invasive to their current workflow, I think that people would be interested and read it. I don't know if it would take off, but yeah, the interest is always there. I think that right now with KMM, probably the biggest issue with that is that it still feels like it's in like sort of alpha, beta kind of land, which I don't know how fair that is because I don't really follow it.
Fair.
It
is. I was just thinking, so basically what we need to find is kind of like the equivalent of a Jake Wharton in the Swift space, right? That writes some doc about adoption of Kotlin. And right, yeah, no, but it's true what you say, right? I mean, the fact that, but then again, I wonder, why is it that when it comes to certain technologies, folks really worry about it being in alpha and, then they'll adopt some library in JavaScript that's 0.077942/pre-release. I mean, you as a chief dependency manager should know that, right?
Yeah, so this is actually something that we run into all the time. We have an internal doc of dependency update guidelines. So we operate on this like 2-week release schedule. And so you have like a release cut that goes out to production. And then for the next week after that, you are cleared to update dependencies that end up like in the runtime, like final APK. Then the week leading up to another release cut, though, we say no dependency updates that week because we want to like get that incubation time. And separately, we have rules around that, semantic versioning / alpha, beta, RC, milestone, all of those. And that's where things get interesting. So would say that we're definitely not as like Wild West as what you'd find in like the web. But we do try to be like common sense about it. It's like we try to stick to basically just major versions. One lens that I kind of try to look at it through is like if something is still in beta or RC, then like, and we want it to go to stable, then like we have a responsibility to help test the beta and RC, maybe not necessarily in production, but we can be good advocates for like saying, hey, like we've tried this out, we don't see any issues. I'll try to do that pretty often on the build tooling side of just, even if there's no problems with beta or RC version, we'll like still comment and be like, hey, like no issues on our side, or like it's resolved when we try this newer one. But there is also parts of the community that sort of, try not to go on a rant here, that spend
this is what this is all about.
that spend their entire sort of like existence in alpha, beta, RC, looking at you, Android X. So it's like, there's definitely a time and place for like all of those. Like, don't get me wrong, but I much prefer Kotlin's approach to this, where it's usually like, they'll have maybe one EAP, one RC, and then like go, maybe 2 RCs, and like it's not really a matter of like wanting to have a better sense of like, when the real release is coming. It's more just sometimes it just feels like there's a fear of commitment there. And it doesn't help that oftentimes the feedback that we get in return is that, oh, beta is stable, we're just stabilizing APIs, but it's ready for production. And it's like, I don't have this context that I can take from like a Slack DM here and be able to give that to a director that's looking at us funny when we have a crash in production and they're looking for a cause.
But there's this whole other thing of I mean, back in my day when I used to be a software developer, there were rules and regulations, and there was something that you called an alpha, something you called a beta, and something you called an RC. And it feels like that's kind of become a blurry line nowadays. It's like, oh, it's an RC, we're just adding the last minute features.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's that aspect of it as well. People have
Yeah.
no respect anymore for labels.
I just want, like, I'm fine with having like one of each of those, but then like I think that once you get to like RC, if you have any more bug fixes, actually once you get to beta, really, if you have any more bug fixes after that, like if your APIs are stable and you're just doing bug fixes, that's what patch releases are for. So that's the hill that I choose to die on.
I mean, and technically RC should really just be one, right? I mean, not RC1, RC2, RC3, because then it's kind of like you need to do the little beta a little bit more before you do the RC.
Yeah, my favorite example of this, and I won't name names, but there's a library in Android X that is doing alpha releases for their patch releases, and it hurts my brain. So, and it's also not one that really abides by SemVer anyway. Like they make breaking changes sometimes in like everyday releases. So I don't really understand
I'm trying to Google that to see which library you need.
So while Hardy is Googling that, so we've been talking on a very abstract level about the dependencies that you have. Do you want to maybe name drop some things that might be interesting for people? Because I always think it's super interesting to understand a little bit about the stack that other people are using.
Yeah, so one thing that I actually really appreciate working here is that we've got a pretty, I would say, standard stack. The most non-standard part of it is just that we like keep it as up to date as possible. Sometimes in ways that like really catches people off guard. Like you can say, oh, we use the latest version of Kotlin, and people are like, cool. Most people will do that. But then we say we're also moving to JDK 17 in like a week, and they're like, excuse me, what? Like I thought that was, is that even out yet? What? So it's, we try to like make that the norm. Our stack itself, we use Android Studio. Sometimes folks will switch over to IntelliJ. If there's periodic sort of like grace periods where IntelliJ supports the latest stable version of Android Gradle plugin, and people will like jump over to that because IntelliJ is a year ahead of the current Studio stable. Only subtle complaint in there. And then on the build side of things, it's Gradle, it's Kotlin, it's Android. We're trying to really hammer modularization in our code base, which has been really good, but also created new problems. It turns out Intel Macs are really bad at thermals, and when you compile more things in parallel and more CPUs are used, then there's an app called like Hot that lives in your menu bar and tells you what your like CPU thermal throttling is, and it just hovers down to like 60%, and our builds are really slow. So that's been interesting, and we're just like waiting for Apple Silicon to get greenlit at this point. Actual like stack that we use for our app, we've got the standard sort of like square buffet of libraries. So OKCDP, OKIO. We are almost done moving entirely from JSON to Moshi. Disclaimer, I help maintain Moshi. And Dagger, which is now maintained by Google, but originally obviously came out of Square. And then we have sort of a mishmash of other things that are common in Android world. So like we started using Lottie more recently. We have some very specific libraries that we use for like AV stuff that we've been working on. So like ExoPlayer. We use a library from Amazon called Chime for doing like our voice and video calls. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like a pretty conventional setup. And obviously like all the different Android X libraries under the sun. We have not started using Compose yet, but that is hopefully kind of like happening pretty imminently.
So what do you think of Compose?
I think that, do you remember Project Marble?
No.
That was an initiative that Google did where they spent like an entire release focusing on performance and just like fixing paper cuts in Android Studio. And I think that there needs to be another one. And I think that JetBrains.
Oh yeah, I
should do one for
that
Kotlin too.
That was recently. No, that was like a couple of years ago, right? The Marvel thing. Yeah.
I think there needs to be more work done. It's actually like, it's not, some parts of it are issues on the Android Studio side, namely like design preview tooling that has not worked for me yet. But the biggest issue or headache that I have with it is it relies very heavily on using, extension functions. A lot of when you're writing compose, it's just like you write something and then you like wait for it to like suggest an import. Then you write another thing. And for like the first like 100 lines of the file, like they're all new imports, basically. It's almost like a one-to-one thing. And the Kotlin IDE plugin really struggles with that. And indexing takes forever. Part of it is that I'm on a 13-inch Intel Mac. So, you can throw more CPU horsepower at it to somewhat solve it. And that is what someone on Twitter mentioned. They're like, just get a M1 Max with 64 gigabytes of RAM and it's better. I'm like, well, yeah, but also like there's something really strange going on. That like, I sent you that video, Hadi, of like optimizing imports where there's like one unused import and the file was like 200 lines long, and it sat there and like thought about it for a good long while before doing it. And I just think that that's like, it's still not putting us in like the place of like iOS tooling, but it feels like it's sort of, I don't want to speculate as to like what the cause of those kinds of issues are at a technical level, because I don't know IDE tooling really, but it feels like it's struggling under some of its own weight. And I'm hoping, maybe K2 compiler will help ease some of those performance concerns, but right now it's really hard. Like once the file has indexed everything, then it kind of works fine. But if you have anything that is either like a syntax error or a missing import, then it's almost like it hits that, and it's like I don't know what to do at this point, and I'm scared to try anything else.
Yeah, I mean, we hope so too, but I could tell you one thing: this episode with you has made me feel much better because I realized that you're not really happy with a lot of things. So it's not just JetBrains. So it is. It's more. It's kind of like not us. It's you.
I'm sad.
Is that the takeaway that we're taking away from this?
I gotta do a vibe check.
I'm kidding. No, I saw that video and we need to improve it. Although I was kind of thinking, you just gave me a brilliant idea. Have you ever seen that app called the Pomodoro?
Is that the like self-timing thing?
Yeah, it sits in like we could just say that like the whole indexing thing in IntelliJ is kind of like a Pomodoro built in. Every time you're indexing, it's for you to focus on other things.
We could do an updated version of that XKCD compiling comic. Just like, what are you doing? It's indexing. Oh, carry on. I feel like I should say some good things. No, I mean, like, I think Compose, like, once I was like in a good spot and like, everything was indexing and I was just iterating on it, like, it was really nice. Especially like once I was finally like, because I feel really late to the party as far as Compose goes. Like I see the value now. Like, before I would see, blog posts or, talk at Google I/O or ADS. But now that I've actually like rewritten like a simple screen internally with it, I'm like, okay, I get it now. Like it's intangible, but I get it. Like it's a really big change. And I think also unbundling the UI runtime is going to be massive for Android development in the long term, because just the fact that what's the line? So it can't be Samsung. So
okay, you got to explain that one.
So there's some of the like most egregious paper cuts that we've had in Android development over the years have been just like little changes that OEMs make in the runtime itself that they're not really documented or anything, and you don't really expect it. But famous example, and I don't think actually Samsung did this, but we like to pick on Samsung because of past stuff.
If it's a Bixby, I mean, that's enough.
Yeah, there was an Android OEM that, so we have like a system resource for some common colors, like white. And there was an OEM that changed the value of the white color to like their system off-white. And so they're basically like, this came out where people were like, hey, like I'm testing our app on this device and like it's not like white, but we use white here. What's going on? And then it turned out this OEM had literally changed what white meant in its little, runtime universe. And with an unbundled UI kit, you're less likely to have issues like that because you're basically saying, I don't want anything that the system gives me for this. I'm just shipping the UI kit myself. Not been always a smooth ride on Android, but this is pretty great. The team itself, like one thing that I have talked about a bunch before is just, I think what really makes sort of the Android and Kotlin communities special is just like, it feels like we're all kind of like in the same room, so to speak. It's not like, say, with iOS development, you kind of like Apple will talk at you for a week at dub, and then you kind of don't hear from them the rest of the time. And like in the Android community, it feels like it's a giant like two-way street. The Kotlin community, which I feel like is now really, I feel like it hitched its wagon unintentionally or maybe intentionally to Android for a while, and is now really trying to like carve out a space for itself. I think is doing a lot of the same things, and that's I think that's really, really good. It makes it a really rich experience because everybody's kind of constantly trying to, just like build cool stuff and learn. So it's there's my Rosie trying to improve my perception here.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was a great 2 minutes in contrast to 48-minute rant. Yeah, I thought I was I thought I was good at ranting, but for the record, with the bandwagon stuff, some of us never jumped onto the Android bandwagon. We were out there waving the flag of, "Hey, you can do more than Android with Kotlin."
Yeah, I'm glad to see that Kotlin is like really carving out like a separate identity and not just being seen as an Android language. If anything, I think that mindset holds back Android. So when we, going back to the discussion about, what about KMM and, can we bring this to other platforms? Those other platforms still often look at Kotlin and think, oh, that's like the Android language. And it's a language you can use on Android, but also I don't quite follow the sense that like that means it exclusively works for Android and therefore wouldn't work well anywhere else. So yeah, I think that that differentiation is actually really good for the Kotlin community, and will actually help the Android community at the same time. So
yeah, I think those are you tried to wrap it up. You tried, but I talked over you.
That is a beautiful ending. That is just kind of like that's on a high. But and talking about highs, I don't know why I would say anything related to that apart from all-day energy pills. So yes,
even the dog rolled her eyes at that. She can't even hear it.
Right. No, these are actually vitamins. I mean, you can see the composition. It's all vitamins. Yes. But anyway, we are out of time. Zac, it's been a pleasure to have you. We should actually do this more often. I love listening to you give your thoughts about technology pains. When you were talking about, the Kotlin community and the Android is kind of like all together in a sense. I thought you were going to go and say like we're all there really sharing the pain, but I'm glad you didn't go there. So yeah. Anyway, so thanks for coming on, and we hope that we'll be able to see you at the next Kotlin Conf, which obviously none of us know when that is or where. But we do know it's coming to a town near you.
It probably is. Before we say goodbye, is there any topic or something that you would still like to shout out to the listeners and viewers?
I should say, I think Kotlin tooling is still miles better than many of the alternatives. So when I complain, it's out of love and of paper cuts. I'm still using it over all the other options. So.
And for the record, jokes aside, we really appreciate your feedback. Honestly, I mean, Seb can see that every time you tweet, we have a channel on Slack, which is
oh no,
Kotlin. It's called Zac's feedback. No, it's called Kotlin feedback. And we the whole team is there, and when we see different pieces of feedback, we always share it there. And your tweets are always there.
I try to at least keep it constructive. So rather than just being like, oh, it's broken, it'd be like, hey, like maybe you shouldn't do this because of like, here's an issue that's filed, and try to like leave it in a positive trail. Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun hanging out in this community. So it's not going anywhere. I'll keep tweeting for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. All right, thanks again for coming on the show, and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, hopefully see you again at some other point. Take care.
And for all our listeners there, and watchers and viewers, and those that go walking their dogs while tripping over stones because they're too busy looking at us on their phones, that even rhymes. Make sure you subscribe, you hit that bell, and you hit the like. And remember, it doesn't matter if you hit dislike anymore, because no one's going to see it apart from us. And we don't look at that stuff anyway. Yeah. So yeah.
I don't even have access to the channel. I like.
Nor do I.
We have the media folks upload this. We're literally not gonna know if you dislike. So just don't bother.
Exactly. Every time I go to my video, I'm like, whoa, look, it's got a bunch of likes. Yeah. So yes.
All happy, all good.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Yeah. See you in the next one. Bye bye.